Unfortunately, there's no lore dump at the beginning that I have to clarify since the second encounter starts right where the first encounter left off at. We get a neat storybook recap of the previous encounter's events, to which there isn't much to recap, and see Sam setting off to Sirius. Watch out, Sam. They're coming for ya.
We're losing them. We'll never catch them like this. We need more power. We need to go to hypercrate.
What's a hypercrate?
All right, everybody, hold on to your crates, because here goes...
My eyes!
Crate was already broken. Oh my God, we're gonna crash.
What was that? Oh, no, I'm going down. Going down where? Pyramids? Egypt? Egypt? No, not Egypt again.
Sam must have already played the first half of BFE. Okay, there isn't a lore dump, but we have a huge lore implication on our hands. Since the big heads are now an integral part of the story instead of a secret Easter egg, who are they exactly? Let's start with what we know about them. They originally began as a model for Mental, as we can see within the game's files. I would show this in the Sirius modeler, but it keeps crashing every time I try to open the model's file, so we'll have to make do with viewing the texture in the Sirius editor. Crow Team were fans of South Park, and that's where the big head idea came from, such as Mr. Mackey.
Is that why in some of the Sam games there's the Easter eggs where you can find the developers and it's all you guys, but you have like massive brains? Is that why?
I mean, thank you. We do have massive brains. I know, we don't look like the big heads, but it was like, I think we were obsessed with South Park, as you can see from some of the humor. And these huge heads were just like, oh, let's do homage,
Since the model isn't for Mental anymore, why transition them to make them an Easter egg of fans? The simple and most reasonable assumption is that it's just a way to give thanks to those who made and supported Sirius Sam. The same function as a credits scroll, just more creative by making use of cut content. But what if there was another reason? The big heads are obsessed with Sam. They follow him around as if they know him, like big fans. They also possess and know of technology such as a working vehicle that uses square-shaped wheels and an aircraft with no propulsion system yet still produces exhaust, wings, fuselage, life support for outer space, and has hyperdrive, or hypercrate in their case, capability. Both of these vehicles are inconceivable to us with our current technology. The big heads are also found hiding near the time lock. There's only one species that's capable and has the knowledge of any of this on Earth during 1378 BC. I'm not saying that they're Syrians, but they are Syrians. When the time lock is armed, it locks in that specific time and space with some imprecision. It wouldn't be far-fetched for the Syrian who armed it at that moment to notice that it has been activated and that someone is coming from the future. Maybe the imprecision is the time that it takes to travel through space-time. There is a reasonable theory that these big heads are the remaining Syrians who were hiding because they knew Mental would be aware of the time lock's activation. That explains why they are so fond of Sam. He's their savior. They even cheer at the end of the game as Sam takes off to go fight Mental. Still not convinced? Let's dig even deeper. In the original backstory of the game, the Syrians are described like so. Quote, Syrians were an intelligent race much like humans in appearance, a bit taller, without any body hair, and with each hand bearing 2 fingers and a thumb. End quote. Intelligent race? Check. Much like humans in appearance? Check. A bit taller? Check. Without any body hair? They all have eyebrows and some with facial hair, so that doesn't check out. They all at least don't have hair anywhere else, so maybe it's a genetic mutation that was passed down since the expedition team would have been a small gene pool. That would also help explain why they go insane in the backstory when they eventually died out. Each hand bearing 2 fingers and a thumb? Well, they have 2 fingers, but I don't see a thumb. It's not a perfect description, but it is very close. Then there is Sirius Sam 3's depiction of the Syrians that also matches everything except the 2 fingers and a thumb part. Keep in mind that the Syrians can use magic. I did mention the Book of Thoth back in the Valley of the Kings, where there is shape-shifting magic, which could explain why the Syrians here and the Syrian in Sirius Sam 3 look different. They could just be a multi-species too, since they were interplanetary. Then there's the problem of the big heads dying from the crash in the cutscene, then immediately being resurrected in the same level, and again in the Citadel level. Although they could just be having fun in their Citadel level appearance, as they didn't canonically die again. That can either be explained by magic or the same technology that Mental uses for the beheaded enemies, which he could have stolen from the Syrians in an ironic twist, since the beheaded are zombie Syrians. That does beg the question as to why the beheaded look different from both the big heads and the Sirius Sam 3 appearance. That's a hole in the theory which does not have an answer besides Crow Team isn't keeping things consistent, Syrians being multi-species, or that this theory simply isn't true. Yet, there's still more. There is a Syrian appearance in Sirius Sam 2 with the Syrian Great Council, and they look similar to the big heads, but of course it's not that simple. They're all short, have hair, more than 3 fingers, and at least look similar to humans. Despite their appearances, they are intelligent to where they can use magic, which they use to teleport Sam to them. Then why do we need spaceships in the first place? Damn it, nothing is consistent in these games. Even with whatever is going on in Sirius Sam 2, they have footage of Sam fighting Mental's forces on Earth, so they can probably use magic to hack into Netrixa to see what Sam sees, which could have been done and relayed by the Syrian expedition team hiding on Earth. That does violate their order to remain secluded to avoid alerting Mental, but since the time lock was activated, it's a moot point. Or since they can just teleport Sam from Earth all the way to wherever they are, maybe the Great Council got the footage of Sam's perspective themselves. We're just going to have to leave Sirius Sam 2 for another time, as the more Sirius Sam games rethrown to the mix, the more that nothing makes sense anymore. Either way, we might be able to safely assume that the Syrians are still fighting Mental by the time Sam travels back to the past. We have good evidence that the big heads are the remaining Syrian expedition team, or at least their descendants, with some inconsistencies. One last theory that I would like to make is fortunately a shorter one. The big heads could be the Humtall, or infant beings, as described in their original backstory. They governed the empires during the time of the aliens, or the advanced alien species that lived before the Syrians, similarly to how the Syrians are to humans. They were immortal, godlike entities, to which only one still remains: Mental. This explains why the big heads are so intelligent, immortal, and their model being called Mental within the game's files. All of the history of the Humtall is a mystery, besides what I just described, so we don't know what happened to them, exactly who they are, or really anything else from the backstory. That makes it a workable theory, however, it lacks much of any tangible evidence to support it, but still enough to have it be a consideration. With the spaceship crashed due to a malfunction in the crate spaceship's brakes, how is Sam going to get to Sirius? Netrixa mentions that she downloaded a lot of data from the spaceship's computer, so at least now there's a reason for wild theories. She gathered that there's a backup device for intergalactic travel that requires the Holy Grail. She hasn't figured out what the device may be, but she is certain that we're far from it both in location and time, since now we're in ancient Mesoamerica. If we follow the same time that Sam arrived, 1378 BC, that would place us in the early pre-classic era of the Mayans. Palenque's earliest founding date is within the late pre-classic era, which starts at 350 BC. The spaceship never left Earth's atmosphere, so there is no way it gained enough velocity for time dilation to have that much of an effect. Since the Syrians placed teleporters to each of the major civilizations on Earth for some reason that's never elaborated on, we're just going to have to accept the time travel that we'll be doing. That also implies that there's a teleporter that leads to ancient Rome or China and our present time, and that the Syrians developed technology that's better than the time lock, but let's not get into that as that's a whole new mess to untangle. The current goal is to find the key within the Valley of the Jaguar to unlock the teleporter in Teotihuacan, an ancient city-state located near modern-day Mexico City, use the teleporter, and continue on until we find the Holy Grail so that we can use the backup device to get to Sirius. Instead of following through with the alpha story of going to different themed elemental planets before reaching Sirius, we're still on Earth. Why did Crow Team decide on this change? Sometime during development, they decided to do an episodic format, which led to the first encounter. There's conflicting information from Crow Team employees on if the second encounter was originally supposed to be a mission pack, but then grew into the second half of Serious Sam, or if it was always planned to be the second half of Serious Sam, or possibly the second third of Serious Sam.
The first encounter, that's how we called it. So the Serious Sam, it wasn't called Serious Sam 1 or just Serious Sam, it was like Serious Sam the first encounter. Because we always had a plan for the second half of the game, which became the second encounter. And then we released Serious Sam 2. I don't think anyone did before. We built the second encounter in 9 months, I think. And we released it as a standalone DLC. So we don't call it DLC, we call it actually Serious Sam the second encounter. And
Well,
this
was it even-
like... Yeah, it was supposed to be a mission pack. That's the name that DLCs were called, at the time. So you release a basic game like Duke Nukem, then you release Duke Nukem mission packs, which you can buy separately. But I think Harry and Roman came to an agreement to release this as a standalone DLC and just call it the second encounter.
Either way, they're treating it as the same product cut up into parts, which is fine, since both encounters end basically the same way. Not much of any of the first encounter textures make it into the second encounter, besides for a secret showing the Great Pyramid fight, so they still had to create everything without much to reuse besides the foundation. They probably realized that if they had Sam go to Sirius now to defeat Mental, that's it. There is no room to make games after that besides coming up with stuff for prequels, as they have been doing for the past couple of games. Even Serious Sam 2 left things inconclusive. At least for the second encounter, I think it was a good choice, especially for including Mesoamerica, since it reflects ancient Egypt pretty well in terms of the religion and architecture. There are still plenty of historically rich cultures to play through on Earth besides Egypt, so why not drag things out to explore them? Although, if the rocket ended up falling back down to Earth for a third encounter, then that may start ruffling some feathers with fans. Nowadays, probably not so much given how much time has passed. Serious Sam 2 does end up fulfilling the original plan for the latter half of the Serious Sam Alpha, so it would be reasonable to think that Serious Sam 2 is the third encounter in all but name. They likely changed the title since it turned out to be more like an actual sequel with an upgraded engine, with that being the Serious Engine 2. As per tradition, you can find a secret rocket launcher within the first level. There isn't anything new to discuss about it that wasn't mentioned in the first encounter. The same goes for anything else that was carried over, whether that be a weapon or an enemy. If there is a notable change or something unique to the second encounter, I will discuss it. Just know that I'm not accidentally skipping over weapons or enemies, even if I don't talk about them exactly when they're introduced for pacing reasons. Speaking of which, the new chainsaw weapon is shown front and center as the player gets out of the pond.
Look, Ma, I'm a lumberjack.
It may seem odd to use a melee weapon in a game like this. The knife has its use in certain scenarios, however, it could be ignored for the most part. The chainsaw should not be. It makes you practically invincible against marsh hoppers. They sometimes attack you on their own, to which you can rev up this bone cracker, put your back against a wall, and stand still. Frogs should really be mixed in with other enemies because now they are only a joke with the chainsaw. With other aliens by their side, you'll have to gauge what weapon to best use since getting in close might get you killed. It also works well against Gnars, but we won't see that many of them until the Babylon episode. The Gnars are usually mixed in with other enemies, so it sometimes might be better to use some other weapon. For either enemy by themselves, they would need to completely surround the player as there's no way they're getting through the chainsaw. The only chance they have is to clap Sam's cheeks.
Oh!
There was one moment in the revolving gravity room in the pit where it could work. There were just too few of them, making it easy to herd them around. In terms of the other enemies, the chainsaw still works decently against other melee ones like the Clear or Cucurpitos, just like the knife. If there are ranged aliens in the area though, you should probably use something else. I will say that there's not much of a reason to use the knife anymore unless you need high burst damage to kill something quickly within stabbing range. Even then, that's a rare scenario to be in. The chainsaw's higher attack speed is going to cover anything else for not using a gun. Continuing on, we can see the new tall grass, which can obscure enemies. Unfortunately, that isn't utilized except for once in the next level, which is fine. Its main inclusion is just to show off the new particle effects that the Sirius engine can do to advertise the game, as well as to help set the new rainforest atmosphere. It could have been a cool way to have the player rely on sound to tell where an enemy is coming from. Its use is rather spotty anyway, as you'll only see the tall grass in the first 2 levels and the new bushes in only the first and third level. There are other things that it's used for, like the flamethrower's flame and fire that spreads off the attack, the wind particles used only for the episode 1 boss, energy balls for the episode 2 boss, rain on the 10th level, snow in the 11th level, and some new magical effects for the last boss. I do want to say, just to avoid any confusion, that this isn't a new system and wasn't marketed as such. The first encounter had particle effects such as smoke. These are just new ones that were added in. I find it odd that they highlight them in interviews, and besides the flamethrower, they are each only used once or twice in the entire campaign. The grass, bushes, and some trees only appear around the player in a specific radius, so anything far out doesn't have anything. That causes them to fade in and out of existence. It is a technical restraint of the time, but maybe they should have been saved for smaller areas or winding paths that can help hide how barren things can look from afar, in contrast to what they look like up close. This is most prominently shown in the second level, one of the biggest open fields in the game. It can also get a bit janky in certain scenarios as well. After making our way through the rainforest to the first temple, we're introduced to the sniper rifle. First and foremost, it is given way too early and for such a small area. It's the same problem that we saw in the first encounter where Crow Team front-loads everything in the first few levels. We're going to acquire all of the new weapons within the first 10 minutes or so of playing the game. There is the exception of the Sirius bomb, but that's more like a carryable power-up than a weapon. The same goes for seeing most of the new enemies except for one in the second level, one in the third level, one that we'll only encounter in the last 3 levels, one that's only seen in a secret and again if playing on co-op, and the bosses. Most of the new enemies seem to be themed after the time periods that we'll travel through, making it more jarring that we see almost all of them so soon outside of their appropriate thematic place. That leaves the new levels to do most of the heavy lifting for keeping the player from feeling like the game is getting repetitive. There were complaints of that for the first encounter, so it seems like Crow Team hasn't learned to pace things out at this time. Another oddity that we only see once is this real-time Natrixa message warning Sam of the incoming harpies. It gives a good chance to try out the newly acquired sniper rifle, but the revolvers and single-barrel shotgun, which was found shortly after the chainsaw, do the job just fine. I think the real-time Natrixa message is a case of wanting to do something new for the sake of change. Given that the idea was abandoned as fast as it arrived, Crow Team likely didn't find much use for it. I'm in the favor of this decision as it could come off as babying the player to get them to notice things or distractive during a fight. We're also introduced to the Sirius Speed power-up here in a rather cramped arena. It's not a good place to introduce it, so I'll hold off on talking about it for now. I do appreciate that they gave a bunch of them for the player to mess around with for its introduction. I'll also hold off on talking about the sniper rifle mentioned earlier, and the same for the Zombol. The Zombol is introduced in a mix of other enemies, so there isn't a good opportunity to focus on it and learn how it behaves when you have Clear and a Kamikaze rushing at you. Combine that with the fact that the sniper rifle can kill it in one shot and it can be a forgettable introduction. The Zorg mercenary introduction later on suffers a similar fate where it can die as soon as it appears if you have an itchy trigger finger, although I do like its Michael Jackson death pose. The Cucurbito gets the best treatment out of the 3 introduced in this level by being on its own, having time to introduce itself, and not being easily killed at this time. Entering the temple, we can see an improvement in the use of lighting compared to the first encounter. Sure, some of it doesn't make any sense as it doesn't come from an actual light source, but I'd argue that it doesn't matter. As long as it doesn't come off as odd, it's fine, especially since this game isn't trying to be realistic. The first game had no source lighting like this too, and the same goes for sometimes highlighting key items with light, so it's nothing new. What is new is the more extensive use of colors and lighting to enhance the tone of the level or to bring attention to something, such as this mask. This 10-second cutscene shows off Crow Team's experience with the Sirius engine to display more complex objects than the usual boxy ones in the first encounter, as well as using light to highlight things that the designer wants a player to focus on. The mask itself doesn't hold much significance. The Mayans sometimes used masks to portray or take on characteristics of what that mask represents. I can't find any evidence of what that may be for this mask in particular, but the original point still stands. Other examples of using light to enhance what's there are these god rays, green tint to highlight foliage, the section in the Valley of the Jaguar with the light path gimmick along with the face and green highlights, the complementary tints used right before the boss fight in the Tower of Babel, and the light green used to look like poison gas to signify danger before you can peer down below into the spike trap pits in the City of the Gods. It expands on what we saw in some of the early levels of the first encounter, such as the dark fog room in Sand Canyon and the blue tint used for the water in the Valley of the Kings. The caveat is that these features take place indoors since there's not a whole lot you can do with lighting outdoors besides the skybox or if it's nighttime. Instead, Crow Team utilizes fog more in addition to how they usually set the levels at different times of day. We see this in the Serpent Yards and the Ziggurat levels used in different intensities, and some indoor examples such as a secret and a couple of rooms throughout the courtyards of Gilgamesh. It's important to note these type of things because it brings variety to how a level looks. An example of a rather dull looking level is Metropolis on the Serious difficulty. It doesn't do a whole lot with its color palette and looks the same from beginning to end. This causes a supporting part of the sense of progression to be lost. It may also tire the player out from looking at the same things for the entirety of that level, which for Metropolis is around an hour. We'll see light and fog interacting with the gameplay too as we go through the campaign, showing that Crow Team was creative enough to not just leave them as eye candy. Wow, thanks Clear. Maybe they're not so bad in the second encounter. With how many there were in the previous game, all of the new leaves they turned made Egypt into this jungle. And with any jungle, Vietnam taught us that napalm is the best way to deal with it. This fight against the Clear would have been a pain without the flamethrower, but now it makes it a breeze. This fire-breathing bad boy can be yours, found within this temple for the cheap price of free. You heard me right, free. Feel the sense of power progression as they are clearly no match for your fresh morning scent of napalm. Even Natrixa recommends it for busy mornings when you have to fire and forget, like skipping the bathroom to drive by piss out of the car window when late for work. This isn't your dad's encounter anymore. This is the newer, greener, and easier second encounter. Marsh hoppers and Clear? Oh please, just use your flamethrower. Need a light? Just use your flamethrower. Need to take care of a crackhead that just robbed your house? Pass a puff and let the flames take them away. Another unruly crowd of protesters? Not anymore with our flesh-penetrating flame. Our XOP branded flamethrower, which stands for Extremo Pyro, can do just about anything. And don't forget our catchphrase.
Now you're all fired.
Call right now to order yours today. Further into the temple, we find our first instances of traps. It's not a good first impression because there aren't any boobies. They're the standard ceiling crushers and act more like a speed bump than anything interesting. The same goes for the next trap, which is the same thing except for the shape of the room. Oh, and thanks for the tip, Natrixa. You seem a bit more chirpy since Egypt. Must have been from all of that sand, am I right? The traps do get a little better later on, so we'll save this discussion. The secret one with spelling out mental in the spikes overhead was creative, I'll give them that. The rest of the level is rather straightforward with some oddities that I want to talk about. The first being the weapon progression. Within this level, we have the knife, chainsaw, both Colts, both shotguns, rocket launcher, and sniper rifle. We are already locked and loaded. It's going to be this way since we're going to lose the arsenal after each episode. This faster pace is needed when we're going to go through 2 resets. The faster pace goes for the enemies too, as we're already fighting a wide variety compared to the early levels of the first encounter. Once again, the new second encounter stuff could have been spread out more. Luckily, the levels keep getting better once the Mayan episode is done to offset the gameplay getting stale. I'm not sure why they gave the rocket launcher 3 times in this level though, twice as a secret and once as a regular pickup, with 2 of them being nearby each other. It's hard to justify that when they could have simply removed or replaced the excess rocket launchers with supplies. Second, the big stone totem. It doesn't look like anything that I could find within Maya and Stela. Their freestanding ones are different with more elaborate designs and have backs that are like walls where it's obvious that it was chiseled out from one big block. The one within the game, from the closest match that I could find, looks like the monolith of Talak. Natrixa just calls it a giant totem entrance to a temple, and the editor doesn't reveal anything. The monolith of Talak, if the stone statue is supposed to be that, isn't from the Mayans, but instead the Aztecs, who came later in time and further up towards central Mexico. It portrays the Aztec god of rain, Talak. The stone heads within the cave underneath the monolith do come with more certainty, however. They're called the Olmec Colossal Stoneheads. They're not Mayan or Aztec, still they're in the same vicinity between those two, but closer to the Mayans' time. It's unknown what they were made for, and the most common theory is that they're the visages of Olmec rulers. We'll see both of these statues throughout the episode. Given how Natrixa called Teotihuacan a Mayan city and the discrepancies found here, there's a good chance that Crow Team either didn't have enough time to properly research the different civilizations of Mesoamerica, they were just blending them all together, or both. Another example of this is how Crow Team used artwork associated with the Mayan ball game, Pete's. It's played throughout Mesoamerica, but the imagery used is of Mayan origin. The emblem on the monolith's belt is a marker for that ball game. It depicts Hun Hunahpu, the father of the twin brothers behind the religious significance of the game. Its story might explain the inspiration behind the Cucurbito too, where one of the brothers replaces his head with a pumpkin. Another featured ball game artwork is a trophy head skull from Chichen Itza. Interestingly, Wikipedia was one of the only sources, from the ones that I read through, that gave a nuanced take on the ball game's human sacrifices. So, we have a stone totem with a possible connection to an Aztec god, and a confirmed connection to a Mayan god. To be fair, the Aztecs did play the game too, and it may have been invented by the Olmecs, but the myth that the emblem references does come from the Mayans. Maybe Crow Team had a point on blending it all together. There's also the possibility that Serious Sam's universe is on a different timeline of events since they have the Syrians and time travel. Speaking of which, maybe these monoliths depict the local Syrians who ruled here. They were treated as deities back in Egypt, so it wouldn't be far-fetched that one of them was Talak or Hun Hunahpu. There is the timeline issue, but with how there are now teleporters that time travel to different points on Earth, which we'll see one at the end of the Mayan episode, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's better to ride with it than trying to untangle all of the discrepancies, or else there will be no end to it. For now, there's a possibility that they were Syrians. We'll also see at the end of the episode that some of these mythological figures are real, which throws another pile of spaghetti on everything. Third, small lava golems are now a common enemy instead of only spawning from killing big ones. The whole Matryoshka doll mechanic for the lava golems is absent in the second encounter, except for the last part of the courtyards of Gilgamesh. That's the only place where I've seen it occur. I'm not sure why the mechanic wasn't used much at all despite seeing large-sized lava golems elsewhere. Natrixa mentions that the temple we're entering has a name, the Temple of Tequeocatlion, the Mayan god of courage. And let me tell you what, Natrixa is pulling an old April Fool's joke on us. There is no real-life temple or Mayan god named as such, and in fact, there is no Mayan god of courage. So, is it Assyrian? Yeah, it is. She adds on that the temple was used to train soldiers and how there's a presence of magic in the air. Why would the Syrians want to train an army? I see 2 possibilities. One is that they've gone drunk with power and want to rule over more land. 2 is that they worry that Mental might one day detect them and invade, so they're trying to prepare in any way that they can. I think 2 is more likely, and you'll see why with how they're training them. Let's take a look. Entering the temple, we're greeted with the advanced technology of platforming. It's alright. The only enemies within this cave come when you're on solid ground and you're left alone to get through the jump pads. They do seem out of place even with the Syrian's magic field explanation. Crow Team could have replaced the jump pads and ramps with gusts of wind to keep it thematic and match this episode's boss, Kukulkan, who can control wind. Instead, it looks something more fitting for a space age level. It makes more sense if the theory that the Syrians are training the Mayans to defend against mental is true. Admittedly, the theory isn't substantial. This section is more of a foreshadow of what's to come with the rest of this level than anything knowable to discuss. The Valley of the Jaguar does feel like Crow Team's sandbox where they tried out different features within their engine. It certainly brings variety, but it's debatable on if they're actually fun inclusions. One issue that I have with the jump pads is that they're not consistent. You won't know how it's going to propel you until you land on it. We'll see another platforming cave shortly after going through a hallway with a mask that spews fireballs. It's the same deal except with reptiloids harassing you and some of the jumping has been replaced with ramps. I do like how the reptiloids are obscured at first, so you have to deal with their fireballs while platforming instead of killing them first and moving on. The reptiloids make it more fun, and I wish that if they have something like this to go all in. Otherwise, it feels lacking, like it wasn't utilized to its fullest extent. An arena with platforms where you have to use jump pads and ramps to traverse to other platforms with biomechanoids, harpies, and reptiloids could have been interesting. Lasers and rockets force you to jump to another platform while fireballs and harpies harass you while you jump. It ties into the gameplay themes of who do you prioritize first and what's the best movement to avoid taking damage. I think that's the issue with the gimmicks found within this level because they don't do enough. They only scratch the surface. Before then, there are a couple of things to look at within this temple. The emblem on the switches and elsewhere seems like it might be important. The first encounter usually had historic artwork in a relevant place. I've managed to track down that it originates from a plate found from the Campeche coast in 700 to 900 AD. I can't figure out who or what is portrayed on the plate, nor does the source know. It's humanoid and has feathered wings. I don't know what could be a close match, but if I had to guess, I think it's a portrayal of someone dressed up as a bird. It's a mind-blowing revelation, I know, just hold your head together for a moment. The Mayans' culture held birds in a sky-high regard, and they have been depicted on other plates. I know that this next part isn't the most reliable since it comes from a travel blog, but it does mention how the Mayans would cover themselves in feathers to enhance a ritual since they thought birds had spiritual power. It's not a widely known artifact, so there's not much out there about it. I'm lucky enough to have even found the one website that has any information on that plate. I do like the part of the article that mentions how the subject matter of artwork turned towards gods rather than ordinary people because it gives me more credibility to say that it was because of the Syrians. They're real and you'll all be sorry when I'm the only one that gets to hang out with them drinking soda and flying cool spaceships while we play Dynasty Warriors 5 for the PS2. Then we have the skeleton statues that are placed around a lot. They're used frequently in other levels too. The editor just calls them sitting statues. Luckily, the reference material for this model is more well known. It represents the Aztec god of the dead, Mictlantecuhtli. The time period for the Aztecs is way beyond when the Syrians were supposedly around and died out according to the original story, and even for the year that Sam is currently in. But when we talk about the Crystal Skull, we'll see that the backstory and timeline is getting torn to pieces and thrown out the window even more than what they have already suffered. So if this god was actually a Syrian, it was one who went insane. Worship for this god involved an impersonator being sacrificed and eaten. I can't imagine that one of the original Syrians back in Egypt would allow this given how they preserved their dead as mummies. Once we leave the temple, we're met with a cutscene and Serious Sam's unfortunate texture popping issue. The first encounter had this too, yet with how the second encounter has more things like grass and trees and has bigger areas, it's a lot more noticeable. It sometimes helps with finding items that would otherwise be hidden among the grass. Bigger areas also come with other problems. Faraway textures do not look good since we're not close enough for them to render properly. They do look nice when they actually load in, but Crow Team did get screwed over on this technological restraint. It also means that trees can magically appear when using the sniper rifle scope, like they're obeying the uncertainty principle. Enemies are affected too, not in textures but in behavior. Sometimes they may not be automatically aggroed to the player, and you can observe their patrol path. It's kind of neat that they have one, like watching an animal in the wild. They may wander off into nowhere to go off on their own adventure because of that. Then there's the issue of traversing the area. Of course, there's a lot of walking, yet what makes it kind of tedious are the blatant filler fights where enemies are only there to slow you down and get in your way. The walking would be fine if it's separated big and taxing fights, but not when it's only taking up time. There's not a whole lot to see either, so that doesn't help alleviate the time taken to walk. Each corner of the map has something of interest, so it's safe to assume that the top left one would too, but that's the exception. It's only a waste of time and doesn't even have any enemies as a surprise. A smaller map could get away with that, but a big map like this has a higher amount of time dedicated towards exploration. Fights also feel more spaced out, like the levels. The first encounter felt dense with enemies, and the second encounter feels like it gives a bit more room to breathe. This isn't a point just for the big maps like this one, but for the whole campaign. It'll be a personal preference on what a player would prefer. I think it's fine either way as long as it doesn't swing too far towards either extreme. However, there is an issue with these big open areas and not having that many enemies to populate it that we'll see throughout the second encounter. Crow Team didn't increase the amount of enemies to fill in the extra space, the same problem that the Great Pyramid in the first encounter had after the arena fight. For example, the square arena in the right side temple of the Valley of the Jaguar is a huge disappointment. The first walkthrough yields a handful of cucurbitos. It's rather light, but okay. The second traversal through it to exit the temple yields 3 wearables and 4 harpies. What's the point of making this arena that is obviously set up for a fight and not for visual pleasure so meager with enemies? This isn't a technical limitation, this is a design choice that was made. It's not a problem with every big arena, some are filled up well like the corridor within the Land of the Damned. Still, it's a persistent choice made occasionally throughout the campaign, even up to near the end. The first encounter was mainly composed of corridor fights and small rooms that could help maintain the density of enemies due to their restrictive size. Spawners can keep trickling in enemies as they die and have them be ready to attack the player soon after too. The wider plains of the second encounter don't have that same concentration, and the spawners are usually too far away to reinforce in an adequate amount of time. Once again, some of the more open fights like at the end of the Courtyards of Gilgamesh do work because of its enemy composition, even if it is a little sparse in the quantity. It's just that there are noticeable parts where there is a lack of enemies for the amount of space, especially for when you're expecting a big fight. One fight that does work well is the one after exiting the temple with the jump pads. The grass hides upcoming enemies over the hill that we're on, and clear keep the pressure to hold the player back from advancing past the hill's crest. That then forces the player to jump in order to see over the grass and for what's coming. It's a nice use of the grass whether this was intentional or not. We can also catch a glimpse of the new enemy tactics. It's most easily seen with the clear when instead of going straight towards you, they strafe to the side or run parallel to you. Other enemies such as the kamikazes can do it too. They add a little bit more complexity and variety to the enemy's simple AI, but not so much where it's no longer simple. When playing the game, it made them feel a little unpredictable as there was no guarantee anymore on what they'll do. You could still make a correct prediction the vast majority of the time, but there was always that small chance that they would do something different and throw you off your rhythm. It adds some spontaneity to Serious Sam's dancing with enemies theme rather than playing the same song and dance. I would be cautious about making them any smarter, as then we're closing in on the fights becoming too complex and overwhelming to handle. Additionally, it did feel a bit off at times when an enemy was close. It made them go off in some other direction instead of towards me when they're already closing in on their attack. It's a bit too artificial at close range. When farther away, it's fine and you'll just need to focus more on aiming and predictions. This mechanic could work well if it was refined more, but again, that could increase the complexity too much, make pathfinding janky, and reduce the game's performance. I can see why it never continued into future games. It did make its way into Serious Sam 2 only for the Kamikaze Clowns, which, let's not breach the wackiness containment of that game for now. I can already feel it bursting at the seams with how much care it has received recently. We also meet harpies flying in and dropping kamikazes like paratroopers. They're weird in how the kamikazes are invulnerable, so you can't blow them up along with the harpies. You have to kill the harpy, then the kamikaze spawns into reality. The same goes for when we see the kamikazes carrying the cannon near the end of the game. It would have been nice to blow them up in the air, but I'll take the limitation to have monster combinations like this. I think it's a cool way to create new threats with the roster that you already have. It also helps show that this is an army that you're fighting against and not just an assortment of aliens being mind controlled, which some of them are, but you get the point. It's nice to see them work together to fight the player. I wish that was done more. One more thing before moving on, there's a secret invulnerability pickup above where the exit is. Even though it's a secret and it's still a fine placement, the speed power-up is a better fit given the size of this place. It would ruin the fight here since you could run away from the hill, so moving it somewhere after the hill would be preferable. It would mainly be for traversal purposes anyway, unless they add in a fight designed around having the power-up. Regardless of all of that, introducing the speed power-up here would have been a better decision instead of that small arena that leads into a building in the previous level. Crow Team is too eager to show off everything, leading to some things feeling thrown in. To obtain the key for the teleporter, we need to open up the locked temple here. 2 gold Jaguars are required to open it, which are located in the left and right temples. Jaguars hold a lot of significance within Mesoamerican cultures, and they all intertwine in one way or another on how Jaguars are viewed. They are seen as symbols of strength from being an apex predator. The Aztecs also had a god named Tepeyoyot who had a Jaguar guise. What's interesting about that one is how his spots represent stars in the sky. Was it Assyrian with a map to their home star system? Who knows? But that's basically it with the Jaguars. They adored that animal like an ancient Hello Kitty for manly men. The temples that hold the Jaguars look similar to the Temple of the Great Jaguar, one of the pyramids found in Tikal. It could also be inspired by the Temple of Inscriptions in Palenque. It's hard to tell. The editor does have names for these temples, however, they're not helpful. The left one is called Temple of Fire. I could not find anything named that in Mesoamerica. The previous level's temple right after the Serious Speed power-up has the same name, but that doesn't reveal any clues. The right one is called Temple Pyramid. Cool. And the pyramid in the center of the valley is called Central Pyramid. It's always a surprise when I find something that has a proper name to it that reveals what it's based on in the editor, which is why I can actually talk about the pyramid that holds the crystal skull. That one is called Wizard's Pyramid. It may not be its exact name, but at least it pointed me in the right direction. It represents the Pyramid of the Magician, also known as El Adibino, located in Uxmal. Fortunately, it has a unique shape of being curved, so there's no doubt that they're a match. The lore behind its name is because a powerful dwarf hatched from an egg built the temple within 2 weeks. So obviously, it was built by aliens. There's more to the story, but that's the summary. It makes sense given how it houses the crystal skull, which serves as the key to the teleporter in Teotihuacan. When both of the golden Jaguars are collected, it activates the sun mirror that blows open the door. It's a really cool detail given how the real-life entrance aligns with the setting sun during the summer solstice. Maybe this was a way to limit the use of the teleporter, similar to how the Syrians used the sign of Amun-Ra as a key in Egypt to prevent easy access to their spaceship. As for Netrixa, she doesn't mention anything about the temples or the Jaguars besides a penis joke. Wait, Netrixa, what the fuck? Did the crash landing give Sam a concussion and now Netrixa is acting up? She has emotions like being scared. She calls the temple with the crystal skull the Temple of the Jaguar, but no, that does not get me going because you got it wrong, Netrixa. Apparently, you have fourth wall knowledge, so you should have just looked in the editor. What happened to the omniscient Netrixa back in Egypt? Artificial intelligence? More like artificially impaired, you idiot. So anyway, we need to get these Jaguars to blow a load into the temple. The right temple's gimmick is the moving wall of darkness. It's a pretty decent one, and the concept of losing visibility in complete darkness does show up again for another gimmick room. The thing that makes it stand out is how you can hear all of the Cucurbitos revving up their chainsaws, but you can't see them through the darkness. Of course, that allows them to get in closer. You could just use your reticle to spot them, but it's still cool. Unfortunately, the serious damage power-up is introduced here. We'll see power-ups trivializing a fight throughout the campaign, but there are occasions where the power-up complements the fight. This is one of the first instances of a power-up causing it to be a pushover. Spraying the flamethrower around or quickscoping with the sniper rifle kind of already does that for this one, yet the power-up removes any semblance of difficulty that it may have had. The Wall of Darkness then gets relegated to being purely a visual effect than something that affects gameplay. Once again, the power-up should have been saved for a better moment. There is a round 2 when leaving the temple where we fight Clear instead of Cucurbitos. This time around, the gimmick works a lot better since there is no power-up. They come down both halls and you can't really push forward with the gaps between the pillars, allowing the Clear to pounce from either side. Your vision is already obscured by the darkness. You don't need the pillars to get in the way too. The flamethrower still works very well against this challenge, but you'll still need to be prepared to dodge. Cucurbitos are more bound to their forward momentum than Clear are, so Clear can turn more easily. They also have their ball and chain projectile on top of that, leaving another thing to be aware of to dodge. It's a good fight even if it's short. Without the flamethrower, this would have been much more difficult. The minigun could work too to spray and pray, but that would be a lot of ammo wasted. The room with the Jaguar has some interesting things: artificial light and stone figures of a beast's head. The editor calls it Samaya Vabulia, to which Google Translate says that it means dragon's face. There's another figure using a model labeled as Dragon Head, but its actual name is Snake's Head. I think the model with the light coming out of its mouth is supposed to be a snake. Calling it a dragon is most likely to make it sound mythological, since it's highly likely a representation of the Mayan serpent god Kukulkan. The model resembles the snake heads found at Chichen Itza, which depict Kukulkan. You can see the snail shell thing by its mouth and the feathers behind its eyes closely resembling its real-life counterpart. When grabbing the Jaguar key, another cutscene occurs showing off a new demon enemy. He'll greet us when we exit the temple, so let's go meet him. The Findian Reptiloid Demon. He's too far away to be a threat unless you have slow reflexes. This fight is basically a sniper duel. Putting him in an open area was the right call since he functions almost the same as a Reptiloid. That's by design. This demon is a product of crossbreeding a lizard from Findia Prime and letting it mutate through generations. The other species that the lizard was crossbred with isn't directly mentioned, but I think we can make a pretty good guess. Oh, and Findia Prime isn't a real place. I'm glad to see that Crow Team is continuing to implement enemies that are biomutant lab creations by Mental. It feels natural that Mental would toy around with biology and have the means to do so given his goal to exterminate all intelligent life. The demon can summon magic lava balls, most likely given to them by Mental, similarly to him giving the fireball power to the Reptiloids. Nitrixa states that those balls can't be destroyed, but she has never seen the BME Pain Olympics. You can use the cannon to do so. The lava balls move faster and straighter than a Reptiloid's fireball, as well as dealing more damage. Yet, they can't curve off of buildings like the fireball since it explodes as soon as it impacts a solid object, but they can glide off of the ground. There are very rare occasions where it will bounce off of a wall depending on its trajectory and the geometry that it's about to hit. They can sometimes glide off of curved surfaces too, such as stairs. In an ideal open field, the lava balls have enough momentum to do 2 revolutions around the player before expiring. Usually they do at most 1 because of buildings and everything else in the way. Other than that, they're similar to Reptiloids. They typically stay in their perch spot and throw lava balls. They have wings, which makes me wonder if that's just to look cool or if they were ever planned to be another flying enemy. The left temple has 2 gimmicks. The first is the wind tunnel with spiked walls. Nitrixa spells out what you have to do. You never really had to open up the Nitrixa menu in the first encounter unless you wanted to know more about the story, but now Nitrixa makes a lot more comments and hints. There were a couple of entries that were hints in Egypt, but the amount that we have from her already, whether hints or not, is quickly overtaking her previous total. There is more of a reason to see what she has to say instead of only reading the entries for the lore, but you can still ignore her if you want to. A good amount of it is filler, and those ones only help to show her new talkative personality. Oh, and the gimmick is just Crow Team showing off their new skills with the engine. It's nothing special. The second gimmick is the same deal. Nitrixa spells out what you have to do, you do it, and everything is fine.
Maybe I should follow that light.
Even Sam says what to do, so if you have no clue on how to progress, you should start taking the short bus. This one you can ignore and fight wherever aliens pop up. Once again, this feels like something to show off the engine and the developer's capabilities rather than for gameplay purposes. The moving wall of darkness at least blended in with the fight and changed the player's approach. Maybe if there was an enemy pressuring the player to keep the crosshair pointed forward or to stay on the lit up path, then we may have something interesting. But as it currently stands, it's not. The environment and the enemies can work together to create a threat bigger than they could separately to make for innovative and interesting gameplay. Sometimes Crow Team does it, like the moving wall of darkness, sometimes they don't, like here. Perhaps they were too focused on the wow factor rather than how the player and enemies will interact with it. In any case, we have both golden Jaguars and it's time to collect the key to the teleporter, the Crystal Skull. Wow, thanks again, Clear. That marsh hopper almost got me. The Clear have become a lot more friendly than they were back in Egypt. Oh, the major biomechanoids too? I'm surprised that one of you hasn't jumped me yet for a pill lying around. I guess the rehab is working. Good for you. I don't even have to use my minigun or Sirius Bomb. Speaking of which, the Sirius Bomb was introduced near the beginning of this level. It's misplaced since it's given at a point where there really isn't any use for it. I'll talk about it later. And the minigun was found with Sam's keen sense for small guns that deliver serious pleasure.
I smell some serious firepower around here.
The bullet's ammo near where the minigun secret is helps indicate that maybe there's a secret Tommy gun or minigun nearby. Sam's line all but confirms it. Maybe Crow Team wanted players to find it, but not to give it outright. Once the final defense is finished with, we finally have the skull. It has some lore to it too. The skull was created by the Mayans from a meteorite of Syrian spaceship material. Around 300 AD, a Syrian scout ship was lost over the Sierra de Chiapas. There are no historical accounts of a meteorite during this time and place, and crystal skulls have yet to be proven to be Mesoamerican artifacts. Each one has been made in the mid-19th century or later, so nothing is going to connect to real life with this crystal skull. It does match up with Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is kind of funny. Crow Team are likely fans of the franchise, with Sam whistling Indiana Jones's tune while a boulder rolled down in the first encounter. The movie's Crystal Skull is also found in a secret valley that looks similar, and that skull is of alien origin. However, the movie came out in 2008 while the second encounter came out in 2002. There was a movie script by Crow Team in the works of getting approved during the second encounter's development. Coincidence? Is Spielberg or George Lucas a big head fan? The world may never know. It is interesting that the Syrians lost a spaceship. It probably malfunctioned because there's no way that they're going to get spare parts to repair anything. The 380 part is way past when the Syrians first arrived and when they supposedly died out. And I'm not sure how this event occurred when Sam took off on the spaceship in 1378 BC. The whole timeline is so distorted. Disregarding that and how things line up, maybe 300 AD is when the Syrians discovered and became involved with the Mayans, hence the scout ship being in the area. That year does nearly match up with the start of the Mayan Golden Age and the rise of a certain city-state. With the crystal skull in hand, the next destination is the city of the gods, Teotihuacan.